What makes you think I'm a cop?
I saw the commotion here the other day. You're either a cop or public enemy number one.
At 95, Clint Eastwood should be running a last-minute check on his will, but instead, he shocked Hollywood with a confession no one expected. For decades, he was the unbreakable cowboy, the Oscar-winning director, the legend with untold secrets. She was the only one who could do that with me. Those are the words that have left Hollywood in confusion. Who is she? And what hidden truth nearly destroyed him? Join us as we find out all about Clint Eastwood's confession at 95. 9 words was all it took. Clint Eastwood built an entire lifetime on the idea that he could never be broken. He was the man who looked at villains in spaghetti westerns without blinking, the cop who walked the streets of San Francisco with a .44 Magnum, never showing fear. The director who earned Oscars for Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby never let emotion blur his focus. To audiences, he was Hollywood's Iron Man, impossible to shake. But at 95, Clint Eastwood said something that caught everyone off guard. A confession so raw, it stripped away the armor he had worn for decades. She was the only one who could do that with me. 9 simple words.
How the hell's a man supposed to get experience if nobody gives him a chance? And Davis is the new pistol champion.
Suppose they panic and start shooting.
Yet behind them sat nearly a century of silence, strength, and survival. For a man who built his image on stoicism, this was not just an admission, it was a surrender. Eastwood was revealing that there had been one person in his long, turbulent life who managed to reach him in a way no enemy, no critic, no award, no setback ever had.
You know those guys? Yeah, they came to the academy after me. They stick together like flypaper, you know? Everybody thought they were queer for each other.
That person was Sondra Locke, his co-star, his partner, his companion for 13 stormy years. Their story began in 1975, when they met on the set of The Outlaw Josie Wales. What started as another Hollywood romance soon became something far more complicated. Locke was not just another leading lady, she became his creative partner, appearing in 6 of his films, from The Gauntlet to Bronco Billy to Sudden Impact.
You won't have to do a damn thing but sit on your fat ass.
What set Locke apart was her refusal to be swallowed up by Clint's larger-than-life shadow. While Eastwood was known for juggling multiple relationships and had fathered 8 children with 6 different women, Locke refused to accept being just another name in his orbit. She stood her ground, challenging his choices both on set and at home. His history of relationships reads like a Hollywood saga. Married to Maggie Johnson for more than 30 years, he carried on an affair with stunt woman Roxanne Tunis, who gave birth to his daughter Kimber in 1964.
Lucas.
Take him out!
While with Locke, he secretly fathered 2 children with flight attendant Jocelyn Reeves. One of those children, Scott Eastwood, would later become an actor himself. These overlapping relationships created a complicated personal web, one that Clint had navigated for years before Locke arrived. Yet, the relationship with Locke was different. Their chemistry on screen carried the same fire they carried off screen, a bond that, for all its chaos, lasted for over a decade, even longer than many of Hollywood's most celebrated marriages. Locke was one of the few people who could cut through Clint's myth and connect with the vulnerable man underneath. In 1989, the relationship ended ugly. Sondra Locke found out about Clint's secret affairs and children. It hit her like a wrecking ball. The trust between them had already been fragile, but this betrayal cut too deep to ever be repaired. Their breakup became a public spectacle.
One night, long ago, under the boardwalk.
Locke accused Clint of fraud and sabotage. He had promised to support her career while quietly working against her behind the scenes. She believed he had offered her a path forward in the film industry, only to shut doors when she needed them most. Those close to Clint later spoke about how deeply the fallout affected him. For all his toughness on screen and his reputation as Hollywood's unshakable lone wolf, friends noticed he was different. after Locke left. Despite marrying journalist Dina Ruiz in the years that followed, directing films well into his 90s, and being honored as one of the most enduring legends of cinema, the shadow of Sondra Locke never left him. Her power over him had nothing to do with manipulation or control. She saw him not as Clint Eastwood the cowboy, the action hero, or the director, but as a man. That distinction created a space where even Hollywood's toughest figure could be vulnerable. Clint Eastwood may have built his legend on being unbreakable, but his confession proves something else. Even the strongest man can carry one love that never fades. What most people don't realize is that behind Clint Eastwood's simple confession is a trail of secrets that cost him more than $50 million and nearly wrecked his reputation. How is that even possible? Exposed $50 million empire. Eastwood's private life played out like a carefully hidden drama. To the public, he was the face of grit and independence. Behind closed doors, he was managing a tangle of relationships that spanned decades. The money required to keep this world intact was staggering. Divorces, child support, settlements, and endless legal fees built up into a financial storm that no film role could disguise.
We gotta get ourselves some transportation.
Clothes. And you should dress not like an American. So, everybody...
The story began in 1953 when he married Maggie Johnson. From the outside, it looked like a steady partnership, the kind of marriage expected of a rising star. In reality, Eastwood was already creating the double life that would follow him for the next 60 years. Johnson provided the image of stability, while he quietly explored other relationships in the background. By 1959, Roxanne Tunis entered the picture, a dancer and stunt woman. Tunis wasn't famous, but she became a key figure in Eastwood's private life. Their affair stretched on for 14 years and produced a daughter, Kimber, in 1964. For decades, almost nobody knew. Tunis raised Kimber away from Hollywood's spotlight, while Clint stayed married to Johnson and moved his career forward. Managing all of this required more than secrecy. Eastwood had to create financial systems to keep his personal life contained. Trust funds, regular payments, and quiet legal arrangements kept his name out of the headlines.
You leave him alone. Get away.
He's not your son. He's not yours to take. His mother warned you, Gringo. Don't be stubborn. This is your last chance. Like the kid.
Records later uncovered showed just how carefully those arrangements were constructed, often handled by intermediaries to maintain distance between the actor and his hidden responsibilities. The pattern deepened in the 1980s with Jocelyn Reeves, a flight attendant who became another long-term partner. Reeves gave birth to two of his children, Scott in 1986 and Catherine in 1988, while Clint was still living with actress Sondra Locke. It made the situation far more complicated. To cover this new layer of secrecy, he arranged additional accounts and financial pathways, ensuring the money flowed, but the truth stayed buried. Then came Frances Fisher in the early 1990s. Unlike Tunis or Reeves, Fisher was already recognizable on screen. Later appearing in Titanic, their relationship was more open, yet still carefully managed to protect Eastwood's privacy. She gave birth to Francesca in 1993, adding another name to his growing list of children. The cost of these relationships finally broke into public view during his divorce from Maggie Johnson in 1984. Her lawyers uncovered evidence of multiple affairs and secret children.
Shrine mate.
Of the Virgen Maria.
And the leverage led to a settlement worth between $25 and $30 million. One of the largest Hollywood divorces at the time. But that was only the beginning. Private schooling, support agreements, and payments to maintain silence all stacked up. On top of that, Eastwood spent millions more in legal battles. The most bitter of all came with Sondra Locke. When their relationship collapsed in 1989, she sued him for fraud and breach of contract. The lawsuits dragged on for years, and Locke's knowledge of his other affairs only made things worse. The emotional and financial toll was far heavier than anyone expected from a man who looked untouchable on screen. Clint's marriage to Dina Ruiz in 1996 looked like a fresh start, but behind the smiles was another storm brewing. That same year, Dina gave birth to their daughter, Morgan. For a while, it seemed like he had finally found stability. But it didn't last. By 2014, the marriage collapsed, and Clint was once again dragged into another settlement battle. Thanks to a prenuptial agreement, this one cost him less than the fortune he had lost to Johnson. But it was still another public reminder that no matter how powerful he looked on screen, his private life was always on shaky ground. When everything is added together, decades of divorce payouts, child support, lawsuits, and settlements, the price of Eastwood's private world exceeds $50 million. It stands as one of the most costly personal sagas in Hollywood history, made all the more striking because it belonged to a man whose on-screen persona embodied control, strength, and tradition. While Clint Eastwood's financial entanglements reveal the scale of his secret life, there was one woman who didn't just fit into that world. What made her so different that she accomplished what no one else could? The woman who saw through the legend and rewrote the rules. Sondra Locke entered Eastwood's orbit in 1975, and she arrived with credentials that set her apart. By the time they met, she wasn't just an actress hoping for a break. She had already been nominated for an Academy Award for her role in The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. She came in with a reputation for talent and determination, not dependency. Unlike the models, dancers, and flight attendants who had been part of Eastwood's complicated private life, Locke had carved her place in Hollywood. Their first connection came during the casting process for the outlaw Josie Wales. Most people auditioning for Eastwood were intimidated by his stature, both as a star and a budding director. Locke wasn't. She questioned his interpretations, challenged how certain lines should be read, and offered her take on the material. That was something Eastwood wasn't used to, and it caught his attention. Their professional spark soon ignited something far more personal. Locke's training in theater and method acting gave her a different set of tools. She analyzed not only her characters but the people around her. She studied Eastwood carefully. She saw the difference between the unshakable man on screen and the complicated, guarded man behind it. Where others accepted the myth, she pushed at the cracks. This was the beginning of a relationship unlike any Clint had before. Locke wasn't content to just stand beside him on camera. She got involved in the creative process. She debated dialogue, offered insights on character motivations, and even weighed in on directorial choices. While Eastwood was known for being a hands-off director who preferred to move quickly, Locke made him slow down and justify decisions. She was his co-star, but she became something closer to an unofficial collaborator, someone who shaped his films in ways few realized at the time. Their dynamics spilled well beyond film sets. Locke moved into his Carmel home, something that broke from Eastwood's usual pattern of keeping relationships separate and compartmentalized. She attended industry events with him, sat in on meetings, and became part of his day-to-day life. This was not the quiet background arrangement he had kept with others.
Oh, we can't leave him here. Dogs will come along and piss on him. Ain't fair to the dogs.
Locke was front and center, visible in both his personal and professional worlds. Perhaps the greatest difference was her refusal to play the silent partner. Where other women in Eastwood's life looked the other way when he strayed, Locke demanded answers. She confronted him about his absences. She noticed when his stories didn't line up. She wasn't afraid to question him directly, which forced Eastwood into elaborate strategies to conceal his other affairs. It was an exhausting dance, and one he had never been forced into before. Locke's emotional range also gave their relationship a unique shape. She was expressive, dramatic, and unafraid to show feeling, qualities that contrasted sharply with Eastwood's famously stoic demeanor. She urged him to open up, to let more vulnerability come through, both in their private life and in his work. Many who studied his later career note that this period marked a shift in his performances and choices as a director. Locke's influence is hard to measure, but impossible to ignore. The films they made together, The Gauntlet, Bronco Billy, and Sudden Impact, among others, carried traces of her input. She was more than the actress on screen. She was a sounding board, a critic, and a partner who pushed Eastwood to aim higher. Though her name rarely appeared in credits beyond her roles, her fingerprints were all over the creative process. But Locke's refusal to accept secondary status also caused constant friction. She wanted meaningful roles, not parts that served only to prop up Eastwood's character. She insisted on equal footing. That insistence often unsettled Eastwood, who had grown used to maintaining control in both his films and his personal life. With Locke, control slipped. What truly set her apart was her ability to pierce through Eastwood's carefully built armor. She understood his need for dominance and security, yet she didn't back away from it. Instead, she pressed against it, exposing his vulnerabilities and drawing out sides of him no one else could reach. For a man who had built his career on being untouchable, that made her the most dangerous and most important relationship of his life. Could the man who rewrote the rules of Westerns survive having his own rules destroyed? Ultimate Betrayal breaks Hollywood's unbreakable man. By the end of the 1980s, the weight of it all was beginning to show on Clint Eastwood. People who had worked with him for years noticed the change, even if they didn't always say it out loud. The easygoing charm that had carried him through sets and interviews seemed to fade. He was snappier, quicker to lose patience, and the smallest mishaps sparked irritation. Some chalked it up to the pressure of wearing two hats. Directing and acting in the same films wasn't an easy task.
You know, we want me to go down there and kidnap him, bring him out of there.
But the whispers around him suggested something heavier. There was a mood that lingered, a kind of exhaustion that couldn't just be explained away by the long hours on set. The late nights, the heavier drinking, and the distance creeping into his work told their own story. It was as though the strain of living two lives at once was finally leaking through the cracks. Sondra Locke could feel it too. She had always prided herself on her instincts, and now those instincts refused to stay quiet. The unease built slowly, like a low hum that turned into a siren she couldn't ignore. By 1989, she was restless. Questions weighed on her more and more, until she decided she couldn't just push them aside. Something was off, and if she didn't look closer, she feared she would lose control of her own life. It started with papers, bank statements, receipts, the kind of things most people glance at and then set aside. But Locke lingered over them. Transfers that didn't make sense, expenses that seemed to belong to someone else's life. Small things at first, but they piled up, forming a picture that was anything but ordinary. The puzzle pieces didn't fit neatly. They jabbed at her, pulling her deeper. Determined to find the truth, she turned to her lawyer for help. Together, they sifted through bank records, account statements, and stacks of financial paperwork. What they uncovered told a story Clint had never shared. Odd payments linked to trust funds, medical bills for people she had never met, regular deposits that led back, again and again, to a woman named Jocelyn Reeves and her children. It was as though each page peeled back another layer of a life that had been carefully kept from her view. Eventually, the truth sat in front of her, cold and undeniable. Documents tied to trust funds she had never heard about, medical bills that didn't belong to her. Payments are sent out regularly, not to a stranger, but to Jocelyn Reeves and her children. This wasn't speculation or gossip. It was a black and white fact, written in the very numbers Clint had tried to bury in paperwork. For Locke, the discovery was more than financial. It was personal. Each unexplained transfer was a betrayal in ink and numbers. The pieces fell into place slowly, painfully, until the picture was complete. This wasn't rumor or speculation. It was fact. Clint Eastwood had another family, one he had supported in secret while living under the same roof as her. When she held the documents in her hands, the truth felt both undeniable and unbearable. The evidence was laid out in black and white, a paper trail that told a story she had never been allowed to hear from him. She had spent years by his side, believing they were partners in life and work, only to find out that he had been dividing himself between two worlds. Confronting him was inevitable. Locke gathered the courage she needed and chose the moment inside their Carmel home. With the documents spread before him, there was no room left for denial. For Clint, the silence that followed said more than any words could. For Locke, it was the confirmation of what she had feared all along, that the man she had trusted, defended, and built a life with had been living a lie. Whatever story he had rehearsed, whatever excuse he might have once offered, fell short in the face of what she held in her hands. She had the proof, and both of them understood that nothing would go back to the way it had been. The fallout wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the years she had invested, the sacrifices she had made, and the reality that the life she thought she was building was built on shadows. For Clint, even though it was the collapse of the delicate balance he had tried to keep, juggling between careers, relationships, and secrets until the weight finally toppled the whole thing, even though he never admitted it, it was somewhat relieving. But for Locke, it was different. The end of a story she had clung onto for far too long, a story that had promised love and partnership, but delivered something far colder. The real question is, could he ever let her go? Hollywood's last living legend. The end of their relationship in the late 80s left a mark that Eastwood never managed to cover. Friends who spent time with him in the 90s spoke of a change that seemed to reach deeper than simple heartbreak. He was still productive, still directing and starring in films, but moments of distraction and sadness often broke through his famously steady exterior. People would notice him drift off mid-conversation or stare out across a set, as if something had pulled his mind away. It was as though the man who had been known for his composure had suddenly lost the anchor that had kept him steady. His attempt at starting over came in 1996 when he married Dina Ruiz, a television reporter decades younger than him. Outwardly, it looked like Eastwood was turning a new page, but those who were close to the couple noticed that he often seemed absent, as if part of him was elsewhere. Even on his wedding day, guests later recalled, he went through the motions politely but without the kind of excitement that normally comes with such a major step. Ruiz herself would later admit that she sometimes felt she was living with a shadow, someone still tied to an emotional bond she couldn't compete with. The same year, their daughter Morgan was born, an event that should have brought joy and fresh purpose to Eastwood's life. Yet friends and family observed that he struggled to be fully present. He was affectionate, but distant, often drifting into long silences during family gatherings. Unlike in earlier years, when his absence from his children's lives could be explained by a hectic schedule or secret relationships, this distance seemed to come from something far harder to define. It was as though he was there in body, but not always in spirit. These undercurrents of regret began surfacing in his films as well. The heroes of his earlier career had been defined by toughness and grit, but his work after Locke's departure carried a different weight. Unforgiven, The Bridges of Madison County, and $1 Million Baby all explored themes of regret.
I think you got dozens of guys here. You could do it, and I'm not really the guy.
You know what? You owe me, Mike.
Isolation and choices that could never be undone. To audiences, these were gripping stories. To those who knew him, they looked more like confessions on film, art imitating the turmoil that had taken root inside him. Even the spaces he inhabited gave clues to his state of mind. He continued living in the Carmel home he had once shared with Locke, leaving parts of it almost untouched, as though changing too much would erase a memory he couldn't let go of. Visitors would remark that the house felt suspended in time, with rooms carrying echoes of a past he wasn't ready to put behind him. He also threw himself into work with remarkable intensity, often pushing himself harder than men half his age. Throughout his 70s and 80s, he directed and produced film after film, maintaining a pace that stunned colleagues. Many believed this wasn't simply dedication to cinema, but a way of keeping his mind occupied. As long as he was working 16-hour days, there was less time to dwell on thoughts that haunted him in the quiet moments. By the late 90s, his legal battles with Locke were finally resolved. On paper, it should have been closure. In reality, it was nothing of the sort. Court records showed he agreed to unusually generous terms, almost as though money could buy peace of mind. But those close to him could see that financial settlements couldn't heal the emotional damage or erase the regret. His children, too, felt the effects. His relationship with Scott and Catherine, born from the affair that had ended his life with Locke, was cordial but strained. There was a stiffness in their interactions that never quite softened. To some, it seemed as if they reminded him of the very choices that had led to the greatest loss of his life. As the years passed, public glimpses of Eastwood also began to reflect this shift. Award ceremonies, once opportunities to showcase his legendary charm,
He hates my ass.
became events he endured rather than enjoyed. He accepted honors with brief words, rarely lingering in the spotlight. Observers noted how eager he seemed to slip away, avoiding the fanfare that had once energized him. When his marriage to Dina ended in 2014, it did so quietly, with little drama. There was no drawn-out fight, no storm of accusations. Ruiz later suggested that she always sensed Clint's heart had never fully belonged to her. After nearly 2 decades together, she came to terms with the fact that she had lived beside a man who was, in many ways, still living in the past. The clearest admission finally came in his 90s. Asked late in life about Locke, he called her the only one who could do that with me. At 95, after decades of silence, it was the closest he had come to confessing what so many around him had long suspected, that her memory had remained with him all along.
What's that? It's a post hole digger. That? Vice grips. Yeah. Wire cutters. You know it's a trowel, come on. And those are shears right there, and that's a saw. That's a tack hammer. You can't fool.
Even his last works seem shaped by the ghost of that relationship. Cry Macho, released when he was 91, told the story of a man wrestling with old choices, trying to make peace with regrets that had defined his life. The parallels were hard to ignore. Through his art, through his silences, and through the way he carried himself, Clint Eastwood showed that even Hollywood's toughest man was never able to escape the shadow of Sondra Locke. Do you think Clint Eastwood ever truly recovered from losing Sondra Locke? Which part of his hidden past shocked you the most? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.